Listen to me carefully, because what I'm about to share with you could change the way you respond to spiritual attacks forever. Most people don't lose battles because they are weak. They lose because they are slow, slow to recognize what's happening, slow to respond, slow to take authority. And in the realm I came from, speed mattered. I wasn't always on this side, exposing darkness. There was a time when I operated within it, when I was trained to understand how spiritual attacks are initiated, how they are sustained, and most importantly, how people fail to stop them in time. And one thing was made very clear to me from the beginning: if they delay their response, you've already won. That was the strategy. Not always overwhelming force, not always direct confrontation, but timing. Catching a person off guard, hitting them in moments where they are distracted, tired, emotionally open, or spiritually unaware. Because if an attack is not recognized quickly, it begins to settle, first in the mind, then in the emotions, and eventually in their reality. I've seen how something small, just a sudden wave of fear, confusion, heaviness, or negative thoughts, can turn into days of frustration, delay, and internal struggle simply because the person didn't respond immediately. They ignored it, they tried to wait it out, or they didn't even realize it was an attack at all. And by the time they did, it had already taken root. But here is the truth that changed everything for me when I left that life. Spiritual attacks are not meant to be endured. They are meant to be shut down immediately, not later, not after it gets worse, not when you feel stronger, but the moment you recognize it, because the longer you allow it to remain, the stronger it appears. But when you respond quickly, with awareness and authority, it loses its advantage. That's what I'm going to show you in this message. Not just how attacks happen, but how to defeat them fast. Because once you understand the timing, once you recognize the signs, and once you know exactly what to do in that moment, you stop reacting and you start taking control. In the next chapter, I'm going to reveal the first signs of a spiritual attack, what it actually looks like in real life, so you never miss it again, now that you understand why speed matters. The next step is awareness, because you cannot shut down what you fail to recognize. And this is where most people miss it. They expect a spiritual attack to look obvious, dramatic, undeniable, but that's not how it usually comes. When I was in the occult, we were taught to keep things subtle. If a person immediately recognizes an attack, they're more likely to resist it. But if it feels like something natural, like a mood, a thought, or a reaction, they will accept it. And that's where the opening begins. So let me show you what a spiritual attack actually looks like in real life. The first sign is a sudden shift. You were fine, and then out of nowhere, something changes. A wave of fear hits you. Confusion sets in. You feel anxious, heavy, or unsettled. And there's no clear reason for it. Nothing external has changed. But internally, everything feels off. That sudden shift is not random, it's an entry point. The second sign is intrusive thoughts that don't align with you. Thoughts that feel foreign, negative, accusatory, defeating. Things like, you are going to fail, or nothing is going to work, or you should just give up. These thoughts often come quickly and repeatedly, and if you don't challenge them, they begin to sound like your own voice. That's how they blend in. But listen carefully. Just because a thought appears in your mind does not mean it belongs to you. The third sign is emotional pressure. Not normal emotion, but intensified, overwhelming emotion. Fear that feels heavier than the situation. Anger that rises too quickly. Discouragement that drains your energy. It's like something is amplifying your feelings beyond what makes sense. I remember being taught to target emotions because emotions influence decisions. If a person feels overwhelmed long enough, they will eventually act from that place. And once they act, the cycle deepens. The fourth sign is resistance at critical moments. Right when you're about to move forward, right when you're about to make progress, right when something is about to change, suddenly you feel tired, distracted, unmotivated, or something unexpected happens that pulls your attention away. This was one of the most strategic tactics we used because stopping someone at the point of progress is more effective than stopping them at the beginning. Now, here is the most important thing you need to understand. None of these signs are meant to stay hidden. Once you recognize them, they lose their advantage because awareness breaks deception. The moment you can say, "This is not random, this is an attack," everything shifts. You move from confusion to clarity, from reaction to control. And that's where speed comes in again. Because once you recognize it, you don't wait, you don't sit in it, you don't let it grow. You respond immediately. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you exactly what to do in that moment. The fast response that shuts down the attack before it can take hold. Now that you can recognize a spiritual attack, this is where everything becomes practical, because awareness without action will not stop anything. You can identify the attack clearly. You can understand what's happening. But if you don't respond immediately and correctly, it will still try to settle. And this is where most people hesitate. They feel something is wrong, but they pause, they overthink, they wait for it to pass. And in that delay, the attack gains ground. When I was in the occult, we depended on hesitation, because the first few moments of an attack are the most vulnerable. If the person does nothing, the thought, the emotion, or the pressure begins to root itself deeper. But if they respond instantly, it gets cut off before it can grow. So let me show you exactly what to do in that moment. The first step is recognition spoken out loud, not just thinking it, saying it. "This is not mine." That simple statement creates separation because one of the enemy's main strategies is to make you believe the attack is you, your thoughts, your feelings, your reality. But the moment you say, "This is not mine," you break that illusion. You refuse ownership, and without ownership, it cannot anchor. The second step is direct rejection. You don't negotiate, you don't analyze, you don't entertain the thought or the feeling, you reject it immediately. "I do not accept this." Say it clearly, say it with intention, because rejection closes the door that recognition just exposed in the realm I came from. Acceptance was everything. If a person accepted a thought, even slightly, it gave us room to work. But rejection stopped that process instantly. The third step is replacement with truth. This is where many people stop too early. They recognize the attack, they reject it, but they leave a space. An empty space invites return, so you must fill it. If fear comes, you declare peace. If doubt comes, you declare clarity. If thoughts of failure come, you declare a different outcome, not emotionally, but intentionally, because what you replace it with becomes your new alignment. Now, here's something very important. Keep it simple. You don't need long speeches. You don't need complicated prayers in that moment. Speed is more important than length. A clear, immediate response is more effective than a delayed emotional reaction. Let me give you an example of what this looks like in real time. A sudden thought comes. You're going to fail. You respond instantly. "This is not mine. I do not accept this." I move forward with clarity and confidence. That's it. Short, direct, controlled. And in that moment, you've shut the door. Now listen carefully. The goal is not to fight for hours. The goal is to stop it at the door, because once it enters and settles, it takes more effort to remove. But when you respond immediately, it has nowhere to go. This is what we feared most, not loud reactions, not emotional responses, but quick, controlled, aware resistance. Because that kind of response leaves no space to work with. And the more you do this, the faster it becomes, until eventually it's automatic. An attack comes, and it's gone just as quickly because you didn't give it time. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you why some attacks try to come back even after you've rejected them, and how to make sure they don't regain access again. Now, here's something you need to understand clearly. Just because you stopped the attack once doesn't mean it won't try again. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you disrupted it. And anything that gets disrupted will often attempt to return. When I was in the occult, we were trained not to rely on a single attempt. If something didn't work the first time, we would reintroduce it, sometimes the same way, sometimes differently, watching to see if the person responded the same way again, because repetition reveals weakness. If someone rejected something once, but accepted it the second time, that was enough. That was the opening. This is why some of you feel like certain thoughts, emotions, or pressures come back again and again, even after you've already dealt with them. It's not random, it's testing. Testing your consistency, testing your response, testing whether your rejection was a one time reaction or a new standard. Let me explain how this works in real life. You reject fear once, but the next day it comes back slightly differently. Maybe through a situation, maybe through a conversation, maybe through a thought that feels more subtle. If you hesitate that second time, even for a moment, it tries to reestablish itself, not because it's stronger, but because it's looking for agreement again. And this is where many people get confused. They think, why is this still happening? I already dealt with this. But what they don't realize is this: the first response stopped the attack. But consistency is what removes its access completely. This is why your response must become automatic, not emotional, not occasional, consistent. Every time it shows up, you respond the same way, you recognize it, you reject it, you replace it. No variation, no delay, no negotiation. Because repetition on your side breaks repetition on the other side, and eventually something shifts, the attack stops returning. Not because it doesn't want to, but because it finds no response to work with, no hesitation, no agreement, no opening. I remember clearly there were moments when we would stop targeting certain individuals altogether, not because they were unreachable, but because they became consistent. Every attempt was met with immediate resistance. Every angle was shut down. Every reentry failed. And over time, it became pointless. That's what consistency does. It doesn't just stop attacks, it discourages them. Now, here's the key you must hold on to: don't measure success by whether something tries to return. Measure it by how quickly you shut it down when it does. Because the faster your response, the weaker its effect, until eventually it has no effect at all. And in the next chapter, I'm going to show you how to strengthen yourself daily so that your response becomes natural, effortless, and impossible to break under pressure. Now, this is where everything becomes permanent, because what you've learned so far will only remain effective if it becomes part of you. Not something you try to remember in the moment, but something that flows naturally without effort. Because the truth is this: in the middle of pressure, You don't rise to what you know. You fall to what you've practiced. And when I was in the occult, we understood this very well. We didn't fear people who reacted occasionally. We didn't fear people who responded once or twice with strength. We watched for patterns, because patterns reveal what is automatic. If someone had to think too long before responding, that delay became our opportunity. If their response changed depending on how they felt, that inconsistency became our access point. But when someone's response was immediate, steady, and unshaken, it became clear very quickly. There was no entry. That is what you are building now: an automatic defense, a response system that does not depend on your mood, your energy level, or your circumstances. So, how do you build that? It starts with repetition, intentional repetition. You don't wait for an attack to practice your response. You prepare before it comes. Just like training, just like discipline, you take the same three steps: recognize, reject, replace, and you run through them daily, even when everything feels normal, even when nothing seems wrong. Because what you repeat in calm moments becomes what you rely on in pressured moments. Let me make this practical for you. Take a few minutes each day and speak it clearly. I recognize anything that does not align with me. I reject it immediately. I replace it with truth. Simple, but powerful, because you are training your mind to respond without hesitation. The second thing you must build is awareness of your internal state. Pay attention to small shifts. Don't ignore them. Don't brush them off. Because the earlier you detect something, the easier it is to stop. I've seen people ignore small signs: slight doubt, mild confusion, subtle fear, only for it to grow into something much heavier later. Not because it had power, but because it was given time. Awareness keeps things small, and small things are easy to shut down. The third thing is control over your focus, because whatever you focus on expands. If you focus on the attack, analyze it, replay it, and give it attention, you unintentionally strengthen its presence. But when you shift your focus immediately to something else, something clear, something grounded, you cut off that reinforcement. We relied on attention because attention creates engagement, and engagement creates space. But when there is no attention, there is no growth. So train yourself to shift quickly. Don't sit in it, don't study it, recognize it, respond to it, and move forward. Now listen carefully to this final part. The goal is not to become someone who is constantly on edge, watching for attacks everywhere. The goal is to become someone who is so prepared, so practiced, so consistent that nothing catches you off guard. And when something does try to appear, it's handled immediately, without stress, without fear, without delay. That's when you know your defense is built, because your response is no longer something you try to do, it's something you automatically do. And once you reach that point, you're no longer reacting to attacks. You're shutting them down before they even have a chance to begin. Now we come to the final step, the moment where everything you've learned becomes active. Because understanding is powerful, but activation is what makes it real. You now know how attacks begin. You know how to recognize them. You know how to respond immediately. You know how to stay consistent. But there is one more thing I need to give you: something direct, simple, and effective in the exact moment an attack shows up. Because when pressure hits, you don't always have time to think through steps. You need something ready, something immediate, something that carries authority. When I left that life, I had to learn this myself. Not long, complicated prayers, but short, precise declarations that could be spoken instantly, without hesitation. because speed is everything. So I'm going to give you something you can use right now, not later, not after things get worse, but in the exact moment you feel that shift, that thought, that pressure. Say this out loud if you can, or within yourself with full clarity. This is not mine. I reject it completely. I do not accept fear, confusion, or defeat. I stand in clarity. I stand in control. I move forward without delay. Everything trying to disturb my mind or my direction is shut down now. It has no place here. It has no authority here. I remain steady. I remain clear. I remain in control. Now listen carefully. This is not about the length of the words, it's about the timing. The moment you feel something shift, you activate this immediately. No waiting, no analyzing, no hesitation. Because the faster you respond, the less space anything has to grow. And here's what you need to understand: you don't need to feel strong for this to work. You don't need to feel confident. You don't need to feel anything at all. You just need to respond, because authority is not based on emotion, it's based on position. And once you take that position consistently, quickly, and without doubt, something changes permanently. Attacks don't land the same way anymore. They don't last the same way anymore. And eventually, they stop coming with the same intensity because there is no delay to work with, no hesitation to exploit, no agreement to attach to. So take this seriously. Use it immediately. Practice it daily. And let it become automatic, because once your response becomes instant, your defense becomes unbreakable. And that is how you defeat spiritual attacks. Not slowly, not eventually, but fast. Now, this is where everything comes together, not in a moment, but in a lifestyle. Because defeating attacks fast is not just about what you do when something shows up, it's about who you become every day. When I was in the occult, there was one type of person we learned to avoid over time. Not immediately, but eventually. People who became consistent, people who didn't react emotionally, people who didn't hesitate, people who didn't give attention to what didn't belong. At first, we would still try, but after repeated attempts failed, after every entry point was shut down quickly, after every angle produced the same response, something became clear: there was no access. And without access, there was nothing to build on. That is the level you are stepping into now. Not someone who occasionally resists, but someone who naturally blocks. Not someone who fights long battles, but someone who ends them before they begin. Because your awareness is sharp, your response is immediate, and your consistency is established. Now, let me show you what this looks like in real life. You wake up, and instead of carrying over old thoughts or emotions, your mind is clear because you've trained it that way. A negative thought tries to appear, but before it even settles, it's gone. Because your response is faster than its arrival, a situation tries to create pressure. But instead of reacting, you stay steady because you're no longer moved by sudden shifts. Even conversations begin to change. Things that once pulled you into doubt or frustration no longer affect you the same way, because internally there is nothing for them to connect to. And that's the key. Attacks don't succeed because they exist. They succeed because they find agreement. But when there is no agreement, there is no connection. And when there is no connection, there is no impact. This is why your role now is not to look for attacks everywhere. It's to remain grounded, because a grounded mind is a protected mind. A clear mind is a controlled mind. And a controlled mind leaves no space for anything else to operate. Now listen carefully to this final truth. You are not trying to become stronger than every attack. You are becoming someone who gives no space for attacks to function at all. That's a completely different position. It's not about effort, it's about alignment. Because once your alignment is steady, everything that doesn't match it is automatically rejected, without struggle, without delay, without confusion. So walk in that. Stay aware, but not anxious. Stay prepared, but not tense. Stay consistent, but not pressured. Because this is no longer something you are trying to do. This is who you are becoming. And once it becomes who you are, there is nothing left for attacks to work with, which means they lose their power before they even begin.